Okay, so I'm here to talk about DITA 2.0 within the context of DITA Open Toolkit. It'll come up in a second, I swear. I'm involved with both OASIS DITA and with DITA Open Toolkit, so that's why I'm here to talk about this. DITA-OT, or DITA 2.0 has been in progress for a while, so this is really going to focus on what's there in the toolkit today that you can test. We'll talk a little bit about the difference between OASIS, DITA-OT. I'll try to skip over a bunch of the filler slides here because we clearly don't need them anymore. It's going to come up in a moment. We're already on the agenda. There we go. All right. What's ready for testing and how we get it? So why are you hearing from me? Because I have a cat. That's the main reason. Jarno wants me up here to see pictures of my cats. But I've been working on this for a long time. About the audience, is there anyone here who has already tried out DITA 2.0 in the beta versions? A handful, good. Slightly more than I would expect, so that's great. Anyone here just looking to find out what's possible? Okay, that's a few more of you. I assume the rest of you are just stuck because there's no alternative presentation right now. Okay, so what is DITA-OT? What is OASIS? It's always good to make the distinction. Does anyone know which one of those is OASIS? Yes?
The one that's winning.
The one that's winning, yes. The black and white one, he's now the big guy who gets all the food. So I think he's OASIS. And the scrappy little thin one is not. It's us. So without the violence, OASIS really defines the grammar. They define the rules. Like they're the lawyers that say this is what's allowed in a DITA document. This is how the processing features are supposed to work. And DITA-OT, well, we pick up the grammar. A lot of people can do that, but that's how a lot of people get the grammar files is through DITA-OT. And we implement the processing. And yeah, basically the OT's function is to turn documents that follow the standard into other things, HTML, PDF, whatever, by implementing the rules of the spec. There are implementation-dependent features. I don't know how many times in the early days of DITA I heard the phrase, let 1,000 flowers bloom. Let implementations go off and do their own thing. Hasn't always worked out, but there are a bunch of things in the spec, like how to recover from errors, or what it means when you have a topic reference inside of a map reference. All that is left to implementations. But what the goal of OASIS is for the common features that we expect work everywhere, they should work the same. So that's where the rules come in. So for DITA 2.0 on the spec side, it's, yeah. It's moving, but it's big. It's taken a long time. It's taken a very long time. Yeah, these are my vacation pictures from a while back. It's a good opportunity to force people to look at them. But yeah, there are some metaphors here. DITA 2.0 is also backwards incompatible in a few ways, not too many ways. You do have to at least make one small change to all of your documents to say this is a 2.0 document rather than 1.x. But this is really to let us get rid of things that we no longer like to see in the spec. So how do you test it? Well, I say the identifier is the main thing right there, 2.0. If you update your documents, there's an RNG version equivalent to this, and put 2.0 in there that says, I want to use the 2.0 version of the grammars. So if you want to test, you can just do that and try to publish, see if it works. And probably will, unless you're using some of those features that no one really likes anymore, or that we think nobody's using. So about the features in DITA 2.0, is it ready to use? Well, some of it is. Certainly not all of it. So if you want to know why not more, well, you saw the picture of the glacier. It's taking a while to get through the spec. There's a whole lot to manage. Sometimes we have more features piling on. Not too many at this point. We're trying to stop that. But if you do need something urgently, both on OASIS and in DITA Open Toolkit, we encourage participation. So if you get to the end of this and the key thing you're looking to test in 2.0 isn't there yet, help out. So what's ready? It's a long list, and so I've given you a nice finished pastry to look at and think about while we're going through this. The markup itself can be used, like the grammar rules are there, so you can put the new elements in. They may not work. There's a new chunking support, and there's support for that in the toolkit now with some caveats we'll get to in a moment. There's a new include element to pull in text into your paragraphs or code. Output class-based flagging, which is just a really cool feature with DITA bells. New multimedia elements, new emphasis domain. Simple table is a little bit less simple. You can do more with steps. It's kind of a fun one. Modified syntax, and then a bunch of things that just work. Like if certain phrase elements didn't have keyref, We've added it to those phrase elements now, and it just gets picked up. It just works. So what do we still need to work on? There's a new key text element. I'm pretty excited about this. It's going to really simplify how you define your keys. It's not working yet in the toolkit. There's a replacement for copy to that's coming. Does anybody here in the audience use the copy to attribute?
Try to.
Try to? Anybody show up at my door if we just forgot to ever implement this? Elliot would, but Elliot only lives a few miles from me, so I always have to look out for him. Okay. There's an example element, which was proposed by someone in this room who I will let him name himself if he's willing. It works, you can put the markup in, but there's some formatting quirks that you'll see in a moment. Multiple hazard symbols in the hazard statement isn't quite working yet on the formatting side. And alternate titles. So if you aren't aware, we are removing schemas. XSD is not in there. If you want to use schemas, recommendation is define your grammar as DTD or RNG and then generate your schema. These extra specializations have been removed from the spec, but we'll probably still put the grammars, like that we plan to still put the grammars out there in a 2.0 compatible version. They just won't be part of the actual specification document. It's a lot of work to get those extra things in. And for things like machinery, we don't actually have expertise on the OASIS technical committee anymore to maintain them. So we don't really want to claim that. Also, with regards to the spec, so we let 1,000 flowers bloom. Sometimes that meant things went into the spec that we look at later and think, this is really more of a weed. We never should have let this in. Or we have flowers that look the same and do the same thing, and so it's time to pare some of them back. And so you may have had that experience where you look at something and 15 years later you think, what was that? Yeah, I showed up at my parents' house one day and they had these on the table and said, you made these as a kid, they're yours now. Oh. So instead now, like when we have two ways of doing things, we want to pick one formal method, do what's proper, and get rid of the rest. So the spec has changed itself, there's a lot of rewriting, we don't really need to go into that. What do you get if you want to actually migrate? Today, well, multimedia domain is there. There's more functional simple tables. There's a bunch of new elements. A lot of it is more intuitive. Like whenever we did have more than one way to do things, we're trying to pare that down to one way that is more obvious. And then, yeah, we're just getting rid of a lot of stuff that no one was using. Okay, now to the main part of this. What's ready for testing in the toolkit today? With caveats, chunk equals combine, chunk equals split. The chunk attribute in DITA-1.x is really ugly. It's not intuitive. If you had, like if somebody gave you a million different options or a million different chances to pick what values you thought went in a chunk attribute to get the behavior you have today, you wouldn't come up with it. Like infinite number of monkeys can write Shakespeare. They would not come up with the tokens you use in chunk attributes today. So we've replaced that with chunk equals combine. If you want a bunch of documents to end up as one thing and output, chunk equals combine. If you want one document to be split up, chunk equals split. Should make sense. I'm pretty excited about that because I've hated those tokens from the first days. There are actually two known issues with chunking. This one we have a pull request open about that we'd like to get a fix in. We noticed that if you combine things, it can pull in some resource-only topics today. That's not good. There's a pull request open. We should get that in a hotfix. Jarno informed me at breakfast this morning that we have some misleading wording in the 2.0 draft specification that has led to other implementation issues that I think we'll try to be fixing soon. But in general, this feature's there and working, and I'm excited about it. The include element, some of you may today have used CodeRef, SVGRef, MathMLRef. Has anyone used those? Almost nobody. Okay, a few people. It's a way to pull other content into your topics. Code, or SVG, or MathML. Under the covers, it was really awkward because they are based on specializations of cross-references, which cross-reference doesn't usually mean pull a whole other file into my document, so it was just an awkward fit. There's a new include element. It's a general purpose include element. You can see in my sample here, I'm just including a text file, and then over here the whole paragraph is pulled in. So we've now got a basic way to pull in text. And those existing elements still work. They're now based on include, so it's kind of a natural path for all of them. It's just more logical implementation. And And again, usually I would be asking for questions throughout this, but I think I'm probably already over time. Oh, no, I'm not. Oh, okay. I don't believe them. Output class. This is my most text-heavy slide. And once you understand what this feature does, it's kind of simple and straightforward and easy, but it's, I think, hard to explain in a slide. A lot of people today probably use profiling attributes like audience or revisions. I'm going to guess that's the case. People use audience, platform, product. What you usually do that today is for filtering or putting a flag where you're directly trying to control the flag with your DITA val. So make it a particular color or put text by it. What Jarno suggested at one of these conferences a few years back was, what if we could just turn that into metadata? So you put, today you put the audience value on there, and then everything with that audience gets a certain HTML class, and then you can go wild with CSS. And so that's what this does. So you can see my DITA val on the right-hand side. Say anything that is flagged with audience equals my audience will get treated as if it had the output class attribute, flag class. So that becomes a class in your CSS. Same with revisions. Anything that's flagged with revision test gets an output class for revisions. Okay? So that's a lot of text. So I have to break it up a little bit with a flag picture, because we're talking about flagging. This one's a bit of a stretch, I get it. But then you add your CSS. And so I've got one audience value, but I use that on phrases and on paragraphs. So here I've got CSS that says on my phrase, I want these things flagged with my audience to get flagged as underlined. And on paragraphs, a green wavy underline. For revisions, if it's phrase level, I want to flag it with a little red X above the text. And if it's a paragraph, I want to add it with a red, whatever that symbol is called. I don't know. And it works. Then we move into multimedia. This one I think is pretty straightforward to understand. You can use a video element. You can get your video of Pickles the cat trying to jump into a box. And for audio, it's very similar. These are pretty straightforward. There's nothing much to understand. I wish I could show you the video, but I'm trying to show a screen cap of the HTML and what this looks like, so it doesn't actually play here. If you want to catch me afterwards, I'm happy to show you more videos of my cat. Markup for steps. This came years back when I asked people back at my company at the time, what would you change in DITA if you could change anything? And the most popular answer by far was get rid of that dumb substeps element and just let me nest steps. A whole lot of reasons to do that. Makes reuse easier. It lets you go to 3 levels rather than having the spec arbitrarily say no one is allowed to have 3 levels of steps. So we've done that. We've gotten rid of the substeps element, replaced it with steps. So here you've got your main steps, and you've got substeps, and then down here you even go to 3 levels. So you've got the main steps, substeps, 3rd level steps.
So,
Result is what you would expect. Yes?
so now as we don't have the sub-steps, how are we handling the indentation?
So now that we don't have substeps, how do we handle indentation? Right here. So there is my step, substeps, more substeps, 3rd level of steps. And so it indents just like with nested ordered lists, basically. And of course, you can customize that if you want. Like if you have certain styles for your steps, and you're free to do whatever you want. It's just that now you can do that. Whereas previously, I think a lot of people got around this by having steps and then substeps. And if they wanted a 3rd level, they would put in an info tag and put an unordered list in there or something. And so it just was nonsense. Another one proposed by someone in this room, a different person, is map resources. It's just a grouping element at the start of book maps. A lot of people who use book maps, once keys came along, they said, well, where do I define my keys? And you can do it, but no one's consistent about it. Everybody finds a spot, it goes somewhere else. So now there's a nice handy element up at the top called map resources. And so if you want to define a whole bunch of keys for your book map, just stick them there. So definitely more convenient. And here we get to the caution about examples. So examples element in earlier versions of DITA was on par with section. You can only put it in a topic body. It's got a title. If you're in a concept, it can go at the end with sections, and that's it. A lot of the time, you have examples that you might want inside of a paragraph or inside of a list. You might want to call out, like, here's my instruction, and here's an example of it as one thing. And you can do that now. So basically it converts the example from a section level thing in all cases to a general block element. The problem with that today is that it's hard to know how to format that, because chances are you're going to have rules within your company or your style guide that says, I want to mark them up inline, or I want to mark them up as a section. So right now, the existing formatting still treats them all as block. So you see this first one includes an example of an example. When we format that, well, it doesn't fit. Oh, I'm sorry. There we go. There's my example, and the running text is before it and the period comes after. So it formats as a block. So if you want to use this, you may have to think about how you want to be consistent within your style guide. You may need to adjust styles. Simple tables, slightly less simple. If you're not really familiar with the model, it may not jump out to you what's changed here, but from DITA-OT, we had a simple table and we had CALS table. Now CALS is really heavyweight. It's been around in technical documentation for a long time, but it is very complex. And so we wanted something much more lightweight, geared towards database tables. That's where simple table came in. The problem is CALS is too heavyweight for most uses. Simple table is too lightweight for a lot of uses. And so people would end up having to move to CALS just to get a simple feature like a spanned row or column. So now that table comes from these new things. First, there's a title element. You can put a title on your simple table now. And then you can put a call span or a row span. So you can have an entry that spans 2 columns or an entry that spans 2 rows. That's basically just pulling in the HTML way of doing it. So it's still lightweight. We're not adding in all the CALS stuff, but we're pulling in a couple of features from HTML just to make this table usable for almost all scenarios. So, as I say, it's just the simple table you exist today with a couple of bits from HTML. We now have emphasis domain. It's been asked for a lot for a long time. I can use bold and italic. Why can't I use emphasis and strong? So now you can. Emphasis comes out as italic in most cases. Strong comes out as bold in most cases. They are both there. This support is new in 4.3. Now, there are people who will say, that's dumb because I don't need both. Why didn't you get rid of bold and italic? And I think that same argument has been taking place in the HTML community for over a decade now. They still have both. We still have both. We will continue to have both. There's a bunch of stuff there that, again, you can put in the markup, but it doesn't really work. Key text is going to be a much simpler way of defining variable text for keys. Alternate titles is a new domain that pulls in navigation title, link title, subtitle. You can define a bunch, you can have much better control over how your titles are used, in particular navigation titles in a map. Get through a few of these. The markup is there, but there's no special formatting for the hardware domain and new troubleshooting, but I'm honestly, not knowing how people are going to use those, that may be fine. Like, you may not need special formatting for them. And then there's the syntax diagram has been split out from the programming domain. So if you use programming elements, but you've never used syntax diagram, it's a lot easier to just cut that out of your configured shells entirely. Does anyone here use syntax diagrams? Couple. Actually, more than I would expect. To answer the obvious question, can you use 1.3 and 2.0 together? Maybe. I would recommend, if you're going to try it, make all of your maps one or the other. All of your maps are 1.3 or all of your maps are 2.0. And that's because features like chunking, like the grammar rules conflict. And so when we're processing maps, we basically turn it into one giant resolved map before working through the topics. The topics are mostly handled independently. So you don't want to have one giant resolved map document that's a mix of 1.3 and 2.0, whereas the topics are running on their own. They'll probably be fine. We're working through the reviews in the TC right now. We'll get there eventually. Questions? My question is, how over time am I? How much time does Roger have? Only 5 minutes over. Wow, I did that fast. Yes?
So, I want to know that when we move to DITA 2.0, are there any specific elements that are not supported? Like, you said DITA 2.0 is not backward compatible.
Yes.
So when we move from 1.1 to 1.2, section div was an element which was introduced new in 1.2. So we give our documents to our customers also. So when specifically, are there any elements or attributes that are present in the DITA 1.2 and 3 and which is not supported in DITA 2.0?
There are a bunch. Because you mentioned it, one of them is section div.
Yeah.
It is going away in 2.0. And that's because in DITA 1.3, in 1.2 we added the section div element, and there are a couple of other div-like elements. And in DITA 1.3 we just introduced the div element that is used in all, it's anywhere you can use section div, you can also use div. And so section div is one of those extra elements that we no longer need, so it's going away. Most of the things that are going away are like domains that folks weren't using. Like the classification domain had virtually no usage. It's going away. Offhand, I don't have a list of all of the other elements, but that will definitely be part of the whole rollout of the spec, is a list of all the things that are disappearing.
So now, if you want to chunk information, is chunk an element and it can be used at any level? Like we can chunk a group of p tags or p tag figures, so that we can it will help us in profiling the content. I mean, various elements that are a part of topic.
So chunk is an attribute in the map. It's not a grouping element. The div element is a grouping element that is available all over topics, and that's available with DITA 1.3. So if you want to group a bunch of paragraphs for reuse or for profiling or whatever, the div element is there today.
Thank you.
So is there any extension to illustration handling from .hvg format to, let's say, .eps or CorelDRAW formats?
So is there an extension from SVG to things like CorelDRAW and EPS? Not within the standard itself. You can reference in SVG anything that would be like automatic conversion to EPS, or anything like that would be part of the tool set that is handling it. We don't have any extensions like that in the toolkit that will automatically do image conversions. So I think that's somewhat outside of both the spec and the toolkit.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm. And Roger, if we get to the point where you're not going to have enough time, just raise your hand or throw something at me.
Okay, I've got a very quick question.
Mm-hmm.
Will it be a sort of conversion list? So you said there's a lot of things going away.
Mm-hmm.
If you use this element instead.
Yep.
It's going to be there. Maybe use a conversion tool.
I don't know about a conversion tool, because one of the problems with that is a lot of people are using their custom specializations or custom document types, and we can't know what's in those. So your elements that need migrating may differ. There will definitely be a migration guide. I, some years ago, wrote a plugin that goes through and basically notifies you of things you're using that might be deprecated where there's already a replacement, so you could get ready by switching those. I have not updated that in several years and probably could at this point. Also, I think I see out of the corner of my eye Elliot frantically waving his hand, so he probably has some idea here.
Yes, so I'm actually responsible for writing the migration guide along
With Zoe, yep.
with Zoe. In the process of preparing that, I realized it would be easier to write the transform to do the migration. So.
Okay, well, so Elliot
Yeah.
will write a migration for you. He will come to your door and write out. For those of you who don't know us, Elliot and I have known each other for a long time, and yes, he does live a few miles away from me, but I think the last time we saw each other was in Helsinki at this conference last year.
Because I never leave my house.
Yeah.
And I know you never leave your house.
Yeah,
So.
we're both programmers. We
And
stay in our
it's
caves.
also an hour in traffic to get to Robin's house from my house. Yes, so, I mean, the short answer is yes, there will be a migration guide. But it happens that most of the migration you need to do for typical documents is relatively easy to do either with an XSLT, or in my case, I wrote an XQuery refactor for Oxygen. So, I'll make that available. I mean, it's
Yeah.
out there somewhere now, but it's not complete because we haven't finished. But
Yeah, and
it'll be there, yeah.
And that will be particularly useful for those who are either using the out-of-the-box OASIS grammar shells or the basic topic concept task reference and don't have specialized elements. Like
Yeah, I mean,
you
if
can't
you-
write a conversion that handles every unknown specialized element. But
Yeah, I mean, if you specialize, you're sort of,
Yeah.
but for the most part, the only thing you'd have to do for your specializations is change your grammar files where the base class has changed. The actual markup of your specialization will not have changed.
yeah, and we also, like, for elements that we are removing, we don't really anticipate people have specialized them, so
Right.
that's why they're going away, because they had so little usage, or there's an easy, swap in replacement. Yes.
Okay, I actually had two questions, but my neighbor asked the first one. The second one, as I understand, the preferred choice of doing callouts list is a simple table for images, right?
Preferred choice of doing callouts is
Yeah.
the simple table? I'm not sure I'm understanding.
One of those numbered lists with some kind of an indicator that refer to.
Oh,
numbers.
okay, yeah.
Aren't there a specific element for that kind of thing?
There's not exactly. The new hardware domain has a part number element, and I know back in my prior company, we had something very similar to that, and the callouts were mostly for hardware. And so we would have a callout that formatted differently. So if you use the part number that way, you can just use that element and display it any way you want. But no, we don't have specific new elements specifically for that sort of callout situation. So I think if you're using simple table today, that's probably what you will continue using.
Okay, thanks.
What is the reason for deprecating the learning and training specification?
And that's a good thing to clarify. We're not deprecating it, we are just not making it part of the spec. So it will be in there, it just won't have its own formal definition in the spec. Learning and training page-wise was about half of the spec. And you remember those glaciers? You see how long it's taken us to get this thing over the finish line with just the rest of the content without that extra half that would kind of double the size. That's the main reason it's taken out. We'll still make it available in a 2.0 compatible version, and I think Elliot may have already completed that.
I've already done that, yeah.
So yeah, the grammar file is out there at an OASIS GitHub repository. So there is a 2.0 version of that. It just, like, the only difference will be that you can't bring up the 2.0 specification and get a definition of the element there. And there's a question in the back still.
When we say we can use attribute value, combine or split, at what level is it happening? If I use attribute value split, do I see split topic refs if I'm using it on topic ref element? Or it will combine the topic ref elements? Can you elaborate the usage?
So yeah, the chunk attribute is available the same places it's available today. So today it's on a topic ref element or on the map. And really all that is changing is that the syntax is becoming much simpler. So today, to split things up, you say chunk equals by topic, by hyphen topic. And that says, if this reference is to a file that has 20 topics in it, I want 20 HTML pages as output. Chunk equals split is a much simpler way of saying the same thing.
Hi. So is there any way to, any plan to simplify the use of glossaries?
To simplify the use of what?
The glossaries and the glossary groups.
Glossary entries and glossary refs. I think there is. I don't remember what we've changed there. Do any of the other?
We took out a lot of elements out of glossary.
Yeah, so a bunch of elements have been removed from glossary. That's right. The glossary, we have the glossary topic, and it has a lot of metadata elements that, in some cases, years after they were created, members of the TC weren't entirely sure anymore what the difference was, like between some of them, like a bunch of them. That has been dramatically simplified, and so a lot of those elements are gone, replaced by a general purpose, like note about my glossary topic. As far as referencing them, I feel like something else changed with the gloss ref, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, we fixed something, and I'd have to look
Yeah.
it up, yeah.
And is it over? Is it finished?
Is it finished? Yes and no. Like, I don't expect further changes, and we've got the grammar changes there. So if you get the latest 2.0 grammar files, they have those simpler glossary topics. As far as processing, I guess with glossary, you could probably say it is finished because the elements we took out didn't have any associated processing because nobody was doing anything with them. So yeah, I'd say glossary stuff is finished. It's ready to go. How are we doing, Roger? Are you down to about 5 minutes for docs?
So you mentioned about strong and emphasis. Right now when we are defining key diffs, can we use strong and emphasis while defining the key diffs? Because you were not able to use the italics and the bold elements while defining the key diffs.
I don't know. and I think that would be related to the toolkit processing, and I don't know if that is an issue now or not. Basically, phrase level markup within your key text being preserved as part of your key resolution. I don't know. But that would be, yeah, that would be a toolkit processing question, and I don't remember the answer right now.
A quick question for the output class on the DITA value. You say it's working now in the DITA-OT, but it's a DITA-2
Yep.
feature. We cannot use this with DITA-1, right? Because we do something similar with the plugin today, I think, to copy forward.
Okay. Yeah, I think it, well, I know it's working if you have your 2.0 topics. It may work with 1.3 because, yeah, Jarno's nodding, so I think it would just work today.
Okay, gotcha. Thanks.
Because most people using DITA-vals don't have a document type in there that says this is a 1.3 DITA-val or a 2.0 bit DITA-val, so it would just work.
I'm pondering about what you said about the example element and sticking it into a paragraph. So if you're crazy enough to do mixed content, which from my point of view you should avoid, but why do you expect a block element to behave like an inline element? Wouldn't it be cleaner to have example phrase like we have code phrase and code block rather than kind of treating example like block and inline element at the same time?
Simpler to handle from a processing side, absolutely. The difficulty there, I think, is that we'd end up with multiple elements that mean the same exact thing, have the same semantic. It's just that the only difference is where they can go in a document, and that's a problem we've made in the 1.x, where we had like list item div and section div and all these things that were basically divs before we went and created the general purpose thing. And so I think there's certainly an argument for it from a processing side, but not so much from the spec side. And that's going to make our lives harder on the tool side to try to identify when something should be presented as a phrase versus presented as a block.
Use the placement like in images.
Yeah, could have added a placement attribute, but yeah. All right, I should probably give up my space here. And yeah, thank you. And please feel free to ask me other questions about